Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for clicking on today's video. Now, I don't just start my videos just to say that I genuinely appreciate every single one of you guys for clicking on my video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something that I've never done before, and I am a little anxious to do this, but I am still very excited. If you are starting to read and you don't know where to start, I hope this video is for you. If you've been a reader and you just want more recommendations, then this video is also going to be for you. I have officially hit 100 read books, and that's where I was like, I need to make a video where I talk about how I've read 100 books and these are the ones that I recommend. I hope that this is a good guide for you, and I hope that I made it simple and easy so it's not too overwhelming for you. And I also made sure to do all different types of genres so that if you're not into one, then hopefully you're into the other. I also want to preface that you are going to like different books than me, and I'm going to like different books than you. That's why I made sure to have a broad range so that there's at least one thing for you, but I just ask you to be respectful. If you were talking about something that you're really passionate about, I wouldn't go up to you and say, you're wrong, I hated that book. We can have different opinions, and I just ask for you to be respectful. Let's start off strong with the very first genre of romance. I absolutely love romance. I can go on and on and on how much I love this genre. I love giggling and kicking my feet to a good old romance. I love blushing. I love like highlighting, whether it's on my Kindle or on the book. There's just something about romance. It really hits the spot. It does. And these books did that. There is so many romance books that I don't have in this pile because they annoyed me. There's something that I didn't like about it. But with these, in my mind, I think they're perfect. I think they're perfect. I love all of these so much. I mean, I love all these books so much. And let's start off strong with romance. So the very first book that I would recommend for you to read if you want to get into romance, it is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Now, I know that you have seen Emily Henry and this book everywhere, and it is for a reason. I have recommended this book to so many people in my personal life. When anyone comes to me and says, Yarisa, I want to start getting into reading, or I want a romance book, I always recommend Emily Henry, but specifically People We Meet on Vacation. This is an unpopular opinion. I like People We Meet on Vacation more than Beach Read, and now more than Book Lovers. I think Book Lovers and Beach Read are amazing books, but People We Meet on Vacation just hit different. This is a friends to lovers. They meet in college, and we follow them throughout the years of them literally going on vacation and all of their experiences. I remember just wanting to finish the book. I remember checking my phone and seeing what time it was and trying to read as much as I possibly could before I had to go to work. That was that type of book for me. Then I would say to my favorite romance books ever. If anyone asks me, what are your favorite romance books? I would shove these in their face. I wouldn't, but I would tell them these. These are the first two books in the Chestnut Springs series. This is Flawless and Heartless. This is by Elsie Silver. When I read this book, this became my most favorite romance book. And then when I read the second book, it became my favorite romance book. I read this book, devoured it, read it so fast, rated it 5 stars. I absolutely love these books so much. It is small town. It is cowboy romance. It is country in the best freaking way ever, and I am so excited to keep on reading this series. These books are so popular too, and they deserve every ounce of hype that they get, but I just can't stress it enough. I love these books so much. If there was a fire, these would be the books that I would immediately grab. The grumpiness is done perfectly. The romance, the angst, the spice, this is my favorite spice ever. And there was a point in this year where I was like, I don't think I'm into spice anymore. I think I'm over it. And then I read these books and they completely changed my mind. This one is a single dad trope with a nanny during the summer. The spice. This one, it's like a forced proximity. They have to work together. I think they didn't like touch until like 80 pages in. And I literally made a TikTok about it because that's how much I loved it. I love these books so much. I am begging you to read these books. Then I would say the next book is The 7-Year Slip. This is by, my foot's already falling asleep. This is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This has time travel in it. It is based in New York and it is beautiful. It had me highlighting in the book when I don't usually do that. The friendship in the books were amazing. And I didn't know that I wanted and needed to read about food in such specific descriptive ways. It talked about food in a way that I never have before. She lives in an apartment that has time travel and she has no control over it. It just happens, and it like stresses me out, like talking about a book that I love so much, because I don't know how else to explain it by just telling you to read it. And there's also a heavy topic on grief. So if that is a sensitive topic for you, honestly, with any book, I should just give a pause on this right now. I would recommend, if you are sensitive to specific topics, I would recommend to search up trigger warnings before you read any books, just to protect yourself. So with this book, it's heavy on the mental health and on the grief. Now to the last book in the romance genre. It is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. This is easily one of the most coziest, most fall, best ambiance books I have ever read. And this is one of the best small town romance books I've ever read. It was so good at completely transporting you into a cozy cafe where the smell of pumpkin and sweet, like buttery leaves is in the air. The characters were so likable. It was so funny. The farmer has animals and it was so adorable to read about the relationship that he has with the animals and the soft spot that he has with just saving all these animals. I absolutely loved this book. Now let's talk about the fantasy books that I recommend you to read. The first 3 books that I'm going to talk about is the first 3 books in the Harry Potter series. So we got the first one, The Sorcerer's Stone, we got The Chamber of Secrets, and we got The Prisoner of Azkaban. These are by J.K. Rowling. I love these books so much, and I love the movies so much. I don't know if I love the movies more or if I love the books more, and that's a good problem. These books, I just read these this fall, and I am so excited to continue the series, and I am very confident to say that this entire series is going to be like a 6-star rating for me. Now, I've never heard people recommend these books as dark academia, but when you search what dark academia means, these books fall under that category. These are fantasy, these are mystery, these are suspense. It's also YA. There's an entire magic system in these books. These have been popular for many years. People grew up reading these books as they were coming out, and although I wasn't a really heavy reader when I was a kid, well, more, I wasn't very good at reading. Like, this was not in my level. There's a reason why I'm reading these at 23. I think if you didn't read them as a kid and you think that's an excuse to not pick them up, I highly recommend to read them even if you're older. But I am 23 and I devoured the stories. I think they are absolutely amazing. There's even the tiniest little bit of romance in here. You are following these characters through each grade and you start to see them grow up, and the tight-knit friendship that these 3 kids have is just absolutely amazing. It's truly a masterpiece, and I highly recommend for you to read the entire series. But since I haven't read them all, I would say 100% the first 3. Then we got House of Hollow. This is by Crystal Sutherland. This is a little bit more of like a fairy gothic. It's also YA, but it's also very like eerie still and spooky, but it is still fantasy because there is like a magic system within it as well. It follows 3 sisters and some crazy stuff happens with like different realms and like death, and people are going missing, and like people are fighting for their lives, and it's so good. And I never hear people talk about it, and whenever I have the chance to talk about it, I do. I literally recommended this book in like my spooky Book Nook vlog where I talked about spooky books, and then here I am talking about it in the fantasy section because it has it all and I love it. Then we have Divine Rivals. This is by Rebecca Ross. I am currently listening to the second one, Ruthless Vows, so I can't recommend both just yet, but I would highly recommend for you to read Divine Rivals. This was one of the first fantasy books I have ever read, and I absolutely loved it. And I was worried that I wasn't gonna understand the magic system and the world building, and I did. This by far is so much easier than Fourth Wing to understand so far, and it makes sense. Fourth Wing is more complex, there's more to it, but this book was so good. I remember the very end had me shook, and I could not stop thinking about it. I remember just being so like, it's very like poetic and it's beautiful, and there's definitely moments where I was highlighting in this book. It was so good, and there's also a heavy like grief topic on this book as well. And even though this book was about war and like gods, if I would have heard that, I would have kind of steered away from it, but I'm so happy that I did, because then it opened up my like horizon with so many other books that are out there for me to read. Just don't judge it by hearing that it's about war and gods. It was quick, it was easy, it was beautiful. The romance, girl, the romance, the spice, it was hardly any spice, and I loved it. Now to the YA books. I love YA so much, and I'm so glad that even though I didn't read these as a young adult, I'm able to read them now. The first books that I want to talk about is The Summer That I Turned Pretty by Jenny Han. We have the first book, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and then we have It's Not Summer Without You, and then we have We'll Always Have Summer. The summer vibes, guys, if you can't go on a vacation, to your dream vacation, like in a tropical like vacation like with the beach, read these books. I loved these books so much. It gave off the best summer vibes ever. It was absolutely amazing. I ate it up. Belly goes on vacation to this most beautiful lake house, and every summer she goes, and she goes with her older brother and her mom has a best friend who owns that lake house, and that friend has 2 kids, Jeremy and Conrad. So there's a love triangle between Belly, Conrad, and Jeremiah. Gave off the best summer vibes, and that's why I recommend it. And I did love the love triangle and like the found family and like the cozy childhood nostalgic feelings. It was so good. Then we got one of my favorite books ever. This is Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau. This is such a good book, and I would probably reread this book. This is also historical fiction. It's based in the 1970s. She is a house nanny to a family that is basically the complete opposite from her own family, and it gave off such amazing summer vibes as well. And the parents of the little girl that she's taking care of, the dad is like a psychologist, and he ends up having a rock star and the girlfriend stay at the house with him so that he can give better care. And so the rock star element and like the fame was so awesome to read about. In the music, oh my gosh. Also, I love classic rock. It's my favorite genre, and there was a lot of it in here, and that's probably why I liked it so much too. Like when a book has my favorite songs, it immediately gets like a whole star. If There's a Fire, this is one of the books that I pick up. I absolutely love this book. Then we got A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. This is the book that has absolutely shattered my heart. It ripped it up into pieces and stomped on it, and it got ran over. I was bawling my eyes out by the end of this book, and I loved it. I have not been able to bawl my eyes out with the book since reading this one, and I probably would reread this just so that I can cry. This was one of the most beautiful romance books I have ever read. It's heartbreaking, it's loss, it's childhood lovers. It's so sad, it is, but if you want to cry, I recommend this one. Then I have The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. I would recommend Lynn Painter if you are wanting to read YA books. I think she does a really good job with it. It's YA, it's based in school. This one is specifically based during Valentine's Day, and it's like a hedgehog moment. I think that's what it's called. The same day ends up repeating every single day, and she has to figure out why that's happening, and it's based during Valentine's. It was the most perfect book to read during the Valentine's season. So if you want a book to put on your Valentine's TBR, I highly recommend this one. Now to the next genre, let's talk about historical fiction. We have two books by Taylor Jenkins Reid. We got Malibu Rising and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. These are both 5-star books for me. They are so good, and they have one character intertwined between these two books, and I think that is brilliant to do. This book is heavy on the siblings, and as someone who absolutely is obsessed with her siblings, it made me even more grateful for the relationship that I have with my siblings. It talks about the ups and downs and the bond that you have with your siblings and the way that you guys will go through everything together. It's also heartbreaking. It is also written in a way that I've never like read before. It's different time stamps. I think it's like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like so on throughout a night of a party that the siblings are throwing. And then it also goes back into past tense. So it's dual timeline, and it's absolutely amazing. And then with this one, it is following a writer who is writing a story about Evelyn Hugo, and Evelyn Hugo is telling her entire glamorous story to this writer so that she can have a book written from her. It talks about the glitz and the glam and the Hollywood and the awful things that actors go through to like be who they are and to get into the spotlight. It's about Hollywood in the 80s, and it was a cup of tea. I loved it. Now, let's talk about the mystery thriller books that I recommend to you. This is the tallest stack that I have here. Mystery thriller is probably my second favorite genre. I love it so very much, and I am very excited to share with you guys the books that I recommend you to read. I also feel like I have like a little bit of everything in here because I have YA and I also have psychological thrillers in here. The first book that I want to talk about is If You Lie by Caleb Stevens. This is a psychological thriller based about a cult, and I am so happy that I read this book. This was seriously Frida McFadden level, and she's the next book that I'm going to talk about. Frida McFadden is easily one of my favorite psychological thrillers, but this was up there with that level. This was amazing. The twists and the turns. I binge read this book. I read it in 4 days. It was amazing, and I highly recommend. Then we have The Housemaid, and this is by Frida McFadden. Like I said, Frida McFadden is my favorite psychological thriller writer. This is my favorite psychological book. Oh my god, how many times am I gonna say that? This book was so amazing. The twists and the turns I did not expect whatsoever. I also devoured this story. I read it so quickly. I didn't see any of it coming. Oh my gosh, this was a 5-star rating for me. This was so good. I may never have another psychological thriller book that's like this and that's able to top this, but I am having ones that are close to it, like this one. This was absolutely amazing, and whenever people ask me for spooky mystery thriller books, I always tell them this one. Then we have a YA mystery thriller series here. I got A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Good Girl, Bad Blood, and As Good as Dead, and this is from Holly Jackson. I highly recommend for you to read the entire series. This is based about our main character Pip, who is at school doing a like end of year senior project, and she's doing it on the murder of Kristen Bell, who lived in her town, and she is a mastermind genius. She does a better job than the cops in her town. She is so badass. She is so smart. I would highly recommend the entire series. If you're looking for a YA book to like dip your toes in, or just like a series, anything, if you are a beginner in reading, I would say these books, because they're entertaining, they're fast-paced, and you're trying to figure out what's going to happen next, and it has you hooked. Then I would say A Flicker in the Dark and All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. I don't know which one I like more, to be honest. I would say that Stacey Willingham has the best mystery thriller books out there. I wasn't able to guess at all what was going to happen, and there's a couple books on my shelf where well, mainly one where I was able to guess it, and that's why it's not in this video. I highly recommend for you to read these books. The next genre, it is memoirs, and as you can see here, I have a ton. Every single memoir book I have read, I'm going to recommend it to you because I think it is a pleasure to be able to read someone's story, and I think it's so powerful and empowering that all these people share their stories in a book. So if I get to talk about memoirs and recommend them to you, I'm gonna. So the one that I don't have with me but I recommend, it is Page Boy by Elliot Page. I have my favorite memoir ever and one of my favorite books ever. This is Rabbit by Miss Pat, Patricia Williams. I read this book twice already. I read this for the first time, I think my sophomore year of high school, and then I read it again, I think my junior year. I should reread it again. It is heartbreakingly beautiful and the most funniest book I've ever read. She is a comedian, but it's also disturbing. Doug Stanhope, he's a comedian. He talks about the relationship that he had with his mother. I cried at the end. There was one specific thing that actually made me really uncomfortable in this book. It also made me laugh. It talks about the beginning of his childhood and the things that he would do as a kid all the way to the very end where he is a famous comedian. He talks about everything in between, all the struggles that he went to get to where he is now, and the crazy, wild, beautiful relationship that he has with his mother. This is not fame. Oh my god, this isn't even the book. This is actually a book I haven't read before. That's crazy. The book that I'm talking about is Doug Stanhope, Digging Up Mother. That's the book I'm talking about. This is a second book that he came out with. That's also a memoir, but I haven't read this book yet. That's the one where it talks about their relationship with her mother. Anyways, good thing I caught that. Then, I'm glad my mom died. This is also a very unique and devastating story between Jeanette McCurdy and her mother. It talks about her as a kid to growing up to where she is now, so we're following her throughout her life. It talks about all of the pressure that she got from her mother and society to be a certain way, and it talks about her experience with iCarly and the other like TV shows and movies that she was in. It's also really heavy on eating disorder, so if you're sensitive to that, then I would recommend to search for the trigger warnings for it. And it was also hilarious and really freaking funny. And I also listened to this and it was narrated from her and I loved it. And then we got Rabbit, which we talked about. Then we have Britney Spears. This talks about also from when she was a kid all the way until where she is in the present moment. This one's insane. The things that her father and her family put her through is absolutely wild. It's also just very empowering and sensitive and tender. So good. Then this is following, I forget his name, sorry, Christopher Johnson McCandless. Let me read what it says in the front. It says, in April 1992, a young man from a well-to-do family hitchhiked to Alaska and walked alone into the wilderness. His name was Christopher Johnson McCandless. He had given $25,000 in savings to charity, abandoned his car and most of his possessions, burned all his cash in his wallet, and invented a new life for himself. 4 months later, his decomposed body was found by a moose hunter. I should rewatch the movie. I first watched it as a movie and then realized there's a book. Read the book. It's such a wild story. Then we have My Body. Emily Ratajkowski, is a very famous model, and she talks about the standards and the beauty standards that they put on women and all of the messed up things that happen with men in her life and friendships in her life. It talks about being sexualized, how your body, when you're in the public eye, like, isn't really yours. Like, it gets controlled by photographers and paparazzi and just other people, and it's also woman empowering because she talks about reclaiming. All of these books I think are beautiful in their own ways. Memoirs are so good. They're one of my favorite, maybe all of these are one of my favorite genres. I think all of these are so unique in their own way. They're all devastating in their own way. I think they're all beautiful in their own way. I think it's amazing to be able to hear one's story. I think it's just a privilege to read memoirs, and I can't make this video without recommending these books. Then, to the very last genre. If you're still here, thank you very much. The last genre that I want to talk about, it is literary fiction. The first one, it is I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. This is by Erica L. Sanchez. As a Mexican, I loved this book. There were so many things that I was able to relate to growing up as a Mexican. It also is heavy on grief and loss. There's also a little bit of a mystery aspect. This poor main character has so much pressure on her because of the Mexican culture, and if you're a Mexican, I would recommend for you to read this book. I think you'd get a kick out of it because of the true Mexican things that it talks about, and I listened to it and it was so good. Then I have Tomorrow, Tomorrow, Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This was also a very beautiful story, also crazy. It's about two friends who are video game makers. They go to college together. It's character driven, and if you would have told me it's character driven and it's about video games, I would have been like, I'm not gonna read that. But this is one of my favorite books ever. I rated it 5-star. I highly recommend for you to read this book. I also would recommend for you to search up trigger warnings. Their writing is so unique. Of course, every single one of these books I've talked about, the writing is unique because it's all from different people, right? All different authors. But this one, specifically, I remember it just being unique, and I remember thinking it was going to be hard for me to understand and read, but it wasn't. It did use a different type of writing with a little more complex words, but I was still able to read it and devour it. Okay, stick with me, folks. The very last book that I want to talk about, and honestly, I did it a disgrace talking about it as the last book. It is The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Sorry, I'm getting uncomfortable saying crisscross applesauce. You know what I realized as I say crisscross applesauce? I don't need to add applesauce. I'm sitting crisscross. I could just leave it as crisscross. It's just a thing that I did and learned when I was like 4 years old, and I never stopped saying it. Crisscross applesauce. I'm gonna always say crisscross applesauce. I'm just gonna leave it that way. This is my most favorite book I have ever read. And if I could stand on a mountain or on a tall building or something and just scream to the world to read it, I would. And this is me doing that in video form. I highly recommend for you to read The Midnight Library. And I feel really bad because I'm sure most of you guys are already gone and are not even watching this video anymore, but for the people who are still watching, I shouldn't have left this book as the last one. I shouldn't have. This is my favorite book ever. Out of 101 books that I have read, The Midnight Library has stayed my most favorite. I read it 3 years ago when I was having a huge life-changing thing happen to me. And this book is talking about life-changing things and how there is so many different routes that you can go in life. And if you are going one way, you start to regret and wish that you went another way. In this story, it is talking about a character who does those other things that they wish they would have gone through, the other roads that they wish that they would have taken. And it talks about wherever you are in life, no matter how unhappy and how many regrets you have, it is important to acknowledge and respect the fact that you are here and lived what you lived through and are on the path that you need to be on. It truly has changed my mindset. When I read it when I was 20 years old and now I'm 23, I have taken this lesson that it had taught me in everything. I am where I'm supposed to be and you are where you're supposed to be. And it talks about just trusting that. But the way that it completely just takes over me, it makes me want to reread it. I want to sit down and open this book right now. But I'm so scared that I'm not going to feel the way that I did when I read it. Oh my god, my camera's dying. Maybe that's a sign that I need to stop talking. Honestly, maybe it is good that I left this as the last book so that I can end this video off with a bang. This is my favorite book ever. this is my favorite book of all time. And if that is any recommendation in its own, if I had to say one sentence to recommend this, it's I've read 101 books and this is my favorite. That is all of the books that I recommend for you to read. I hope that there is at least one here for whatever type of genre that you like, whatever genre you prefer, or if you're wanting to expand your reading and pick up a book that you wouldn't typically read or a genre that you wouldn't typically read. I hope that there's at least one or two here. I had such a lovely time making this video. Like I said, I've read 100 books and it has been a journey, and I feel like it's only the beginning. I can just imagine the next 100 books that I'm going to be reading in my life. My death anxiety kicked in. I was like, well, what if I'm not able to read 100 more? I absolutely adore reading. There's a reason why I make videos every single week about them. I really hope that you enjoyed. If you have any recommendations for me, then I would encourage you to leave them down below in the comments. And that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!